Mrs. Rabbit suddenly shot down a hole. "You can't live down a hole," puffed Victoria. But Mrs. Rabbit did. The hole was just big enough for her, but much too small for Victoria. "This is no place to live," said Victoria. "It's too small for me. Thank you, Mrs. Rabbit, but I will go back to my mother's pocket." Mrs. Kangaroo spring cleaned her pocket, and for a little while it was a good place to be. But soon she began to find all sorts of things which she put in the pocket on top of Victoria. She found a wristwatch, a feather, a fountain pen, a mushroom, a cup and a saucer, some nuts and bolts, a book, a box of matches, some cotton reels, a spoon and a fork, a squashed tube of paint, and a cricket bat. Victoria had to move out again. She went to the lake and found Mrs. Goose. "Please let me live the way your children live," she said. And so she joined the little geese in their wet and spiky nest. "You will have to hang your long feet over the edge," said Mrs. Goose. After 2 wet and spiky days, Victoria got out of the nest. "I'm sorry," she said to the geese, "but it isn't a kangaroo sort of nest." Victoria wandered on. Sometimes she stayed a little time with someone, and sometimes she didn't. In the end, she went back to her mother. "Victoria," said her mother happily, "where have you been? How I've missed you." Victoria told her mother about the places she had tried to live in that would be better than the pocket. "But you are too big for my pocket now," said her mother. "There is someone else there now. Look." Victoria looked, and there was a baby kangaroo so small that it was hardly there at all. "That is your brother," said Mrs. Kangaroo. "But where shall I live now?" said Victoria. "With me," said her mother. "We can all 3 go anywhere we like, and if we don't like it when we get there, we can bounce somewhere else." And the 3 kangaroos bounced off. I'm just going to pause a second, try and adjust the cables. Okay, so now we're going to read The Little Witch. The big city was dark. Even the streetlights were out. All day people had gone up and down, up and down. Cars and buses that roared and rattled busily along. But now they'd all gone home to bed, and only the wind, the shadows, and a small kitten wandered in the wide, still streets. The kitten chased a piece of paper, pretending it was a mouse. He patted at it with his paws, and it flipped behind a rubbish bin. Quick as a wink, he leaped after it, and then forgot it because he found something else. "What is this?" he asked the wind. "Here asleep behind the rubbish bin. I have never seen it before." The wind was bowling a newspaper along, but he dropped it and came to see. The great stalking shadows looked down from everywhere. "Ah," too big for her. The kitten sprang at the broom. Then he noticed something. "Wind!" he cried. "See, wherever the witch walks, she leaves a trail of flowers." Yes, it is true, the little witch had lots of magic in her, but she had not learned to use it properly or to hide it, any more than she had learned to talk. So, wherever she put her feet, what is that word? Mignonette grew, I don't know what that is, and rosemary, violets, lily of the valley, and tiny pink and white roses, all through the streets and all across the road. Butterflies came from far and wide to dance and drink. "Who is that down there?" asked a young moth. "It is a baby witch who has made these fine crimson feast rooms for us," a tattered old moth answered. The wind followed along, playing and juggling with the flowers and their sweet smells. "I shall sweep these all over the city," he said. In their sleep, people smelled the flowers and smiled, dreaming happily. Now the witch looked up at the tall buildings. Windows looked down at her with scorn, and their square, sharp shapes seemed angry to her. She pointed her finger at them. Out of the cracks and chinks suddenly crept long, twining vines and green leaves. Slowly flowers opened on them, great crimson flowers like roses smelling of honey. The little witch laughed, but in a moment she became solemn. She was so alone. Then the kitten scuttled and pounced at her bare pink heels, and the little witch knew she had a friend. Dragging her broom for the kitten to chase, she wandered on, leaving a trail of flowers. Now the little witch stood in the street, very small and lost and cold in her blue smock and bare feet. She pointed up at the city clock tower, and it became a huge fir tree, while the clock face turned into a white, nodding owl and flew away. The owl flew as fast as the wind to a tall, dark castle perched high on a hill. There at the window sat a slim, tired witch woman, looking out into the night. "Where, oh where is my little baby witch?" "Ooh," cried the owl, "there is a little witch down in the city, and she is enchanting everything. What will the people say tomorrow?" The witch woman rode her broomstick through the sky and over the city, looking eagerly down through the mists. Far below she could see the little witch running and hiding in doorways while the kitten chased after her. Down flew the witch woman, down to a shop doorway. The little witch and the kitten stopped and stared at her. "Why," said the witch woman in a dark, velvety voice, "you are my own dear little witch, my lost little witch." She held out her arms, and the little witch ran into them. She wasn't lost anymore. The witch woman looked around at the enchanted city, and she smiled. "I'll leave it as it is," she said, "for a surprise tomorrow." Then she gathered the little witch onto a broomstick, and the kitten jumped on too, and off they went to their tall castle home, with windows as deep as night, and lived there happily ever after. And the next day, when the people got up and came out to work, the city was full of flowers and the echoes of laughter. That was a strange one. Junk Day on Juniper Street. How did it begin? No one on Juniper Street really can say. Benny and Jenny say it began in their house. Debbie says it really began in her backyard. But Davy thinks his father started it all. One morning, Davy's father was reading his newspaper. "Take a look at this," he said to Davy's mother. "Do you have junk around your house? Then it's clean-up time." "Do we have junk?" asked Davy. "Well," said his mother. Later, Davy's mother and Debbie's mother met in the backyard. Davy's mother said, "Look at this," and she showed her the newspaper. "Do we have junk?" asked Debbie. said her mother. Later, some parents met to have coffee. They met at Benny and Jenny's house. "Did you see this?" asked Debbie's mother, and she showed them the newspaper. Jenny asked, "Do we have junk?" All the parents began to laugh. "We all have junk," they said. "Lots and lots of junk." Then someone said, "Let's do it. Let's have a take out all the junk day." So Juniper Street had a junk day. It was a big cleanup time in every house. Mothers and fathers and children walked from one room to the next saying, "Do we need this anymore? Do we want to keep that?" Then everyone began to put out the junk. The old chairs, the old tables, the old toys and pictures and books. And every time they looked around the house, people saw more junk to take out. An old lamp, a yellow bird cage, a big rocking chair. Soon there was a pile of junk outside every house on Juniper Street. Davy's father looked up and down the street. "Wow," he said, "we will need a big truck to take all that away." Benny's father called up the junk man. "We have lots of junk on Juniper Street," he told the man. "You will need a big truck to take it all." "I have a big truck," said the junk man, "but I can't come today. I will come for your junk in the morning." "Don't forget," said Benny's father, "a big truck." All day people walked past the piles of junk on Juniper Street. It was hard to go by without taking a good look. Davy stopped outside Debbie's house. "Say, there's a good wheel," he cried. "I need a wheel like that for my wagon." "May I have it?" Debbie's mother said yes. Later, Debbie's father stopped to look at the junk outside Davy's house. He saw an old toolbox. "Why, it's just what I need," he said. "Take it," said Davy's father. Soon many people were saying, "Take it." Jenny's mother saw a little table she liked. "I need a little table in the little room," she said. Debbie's mother found a big hat box in the junk outside Jenny's house. "I can keep my big red hat in this," she said happily. Jenny saw a doll's bed across the street. She took a doll, Amanda, across the street and put her in the bed. "It's just like the 3 bears," she told Amanda. "Not too big, not too little, but just right." So Jenny asked for the doll's bed. By the time everyone was visiting the junk next door and the junk across the street, a man picked up a lamp. "Do you call this junk?" he asked. "I can fix this lamp in no time," and off he went with it. The old lady took home the yellow bird cage. "Now I can get a bird," she cried. Someone was happy to find a window box. "I'll paint it green," he said, "and put in some geraniums." Someone saw an old picture of the sea. "I lived by the sea when I was a boy," he said, and he took the picture home. By the time the sun went down, there was no more junk on Juniper Street. Well, almost none. One thing was left. It was a big rocking chair. Many people stopped to look at it, but everyone said, "Too big." So there it stood. The next morning, a big truck came down Juniper Street. "Oh my," said Benny's father. "We forgot to tell the junk man not to come." The truck came slowly down the street and stopped. The man who got out of the truck was big too. He looked up and down the street. All he saw was the rocking chair. He walked over and looked at it. Then he sat down and began to rock. "At last," he said happily, "a big rocking chair." Then he put the chair on his truck and off he went with all the junk on Juniper Street. Okay, I think we'll do one more. Oh gosh, sorry. The Animals Garden. "A princess is coming to visit our country," said a lion. Now how can we show her how happy we are to see her?" "We could bow very low and smile," said Hippo, "but some of us aren't the right shape for bowing, and smiling isn't enough by itself." "We could show the princess how fast we can run," said Giraffe, "or jump added Grasshopper. But some of us aren't very good at running or jumping. We could cheer, said Porcupine, or trumpet, added Elephant. But perhaps the princess would be frightened. We could dance, said Secretary Bird. Lion looked at Hippo and tried to imagine him dancing. He shook his head, and the animals stared at each other and sighed. Small Brown Bird, who had listened quietly, opened his beak and chirruped shyly. Couldn't we make a garden, Lion? Princesses love flowers. Everyone stared at Small Brown Bird. That's quite a good idea, said Lion. We can all help to make a garden. First, the animals chose a piece of land. But it's much too rough, said Lion. We must break up those big hard lumps of earth. I will do that, cried Hippo at once. My feet are large and my body is heavy. He stamped on the earth with his big feet until it was smooth and fine. Good, said Lion. Now we must make some tiny holes in which to plant the flower seeds. I will do that, Porcupine cried. The spines on my back are very sharp. He curled himself up into a prickly ball and rolled over and over the earth until it was covered with tiny holes. Good, said Lion. Now we must plant seeds. I will do that, said Grasshopper. I am light and quick. He jumped lightly and quickly over the earth, planting the seeds. Good, said Lion. Now we must write the names of the flowers on the wooden labels so that we know which is which. I will do that, cried Secretary Bird. I have plenty of quills. He took one of the quills from his head and wrote the names of the flowers on the labels. Good, said Lion. Now we must water the garden all over. I will do that, Elephant cried. I will use my trunk. He filled his trunk at the river and spouted water all over the garden. Good, said Lion. Now we must keep a lookout for Monkey so that he won't come and spoil our garden. I will do that, cried Giraffe. He stretched his long neck and peered this way and that, keeping a lookout for Monkey. Small Brown Bird hung his head. He had wanted to help in making the garden, but it seemed that a Small Brown Bird was useless for helping to make a garden. The tiny seedlings began to grow, but when Lion looked at the garden one day, he shook his head and growled in his throat. Those weeds that are growing are ugly, he said. They will spoil our garden. Now who will pull out all of these ugly weeds? None of the animals spoke at first. They looked at the ground and shuffled their feet. Then Hippo said in a sulky voice, I'm sure that I can't pull out the weeds. My feet are too big. They would crush the seedlings. My spines would scratch the leaves, said Porcupine. The weeds are much too heavy for me, said Grasshopper. My stiff quills would bruise the buds, said Secretary Bird. My trunk would break the stems, said Elephant. It's no good looking at me, said Giraffe. As you very well know, my neck is so long that I can't stoop down. The lazy animals turned their backs on the weeds. Small Brown Bird flew down to the garden. With his tiny beak he tugged at a weed, then flew away with the weed in his beak and dropped it behind a prickly thorn bush. Then back he flew to the garden again to tug at another weed. All through the long, hot, tiring day, Small Brown Bird worked in the garden, pulling the weeds up one by one. The roots were strong and his beak was tiny, so the pile of weeds was still a very little one. When the sun went down behind the hills and Small Brown Bird had to rest. But when he closed his eyes and slept, he dreamed that the princess smiled at him kindly. Day after day, Small Brown Bird weeded the garden. There were times when his wings ached with tiredness and when the weeds hurt his back. But one beautiful day, his work was finished. The pile of weeds behind the thorn bush was nearly as high as the thorn bush itself. Small Brown Bird looked at the garden, and not one weed could he see. The red and blue and yellow flowers had grown up straight and tall and lovely. The very next day, Giraffe looked over the trees and shouted, She's coming! I see her! The princess is coming! The animals gathered around the garden, but Small Brown Bird flew to a tree and peeped at the lovely princess through the leaves. The princess smiled when she saw the garden. It's the prettiest garden I've ever seen. Did you really make make for me?" she said. "Yes, we made it for you, Princess," said the animals. "You must have worked very hard indeed." "Yes, we worked very hard, Princess," said the animals, smiling proudly. "Will you give me some of your beautiful flowers? Now who will pick them?" smiled the princess. Lion stepped forward. "I told everybody what to do, so I should pick the flowers," he said. "I broke up the earth," said Hippo. "I made holes for the seeds," said Porcupine. "I planted the seeds," said Grasshopper. "I wrote the labels," said Secretary Bird. "I watered the garden," said Elephant. "I kept a lookout for Monkey," said Giraffe. The princess smiled. "Tell me," she said, "who weeded the garden?" None of the animals answered her question. They looked at the ground and shuffled their feet. The princess looked up at the tree in which Small Brown Bird was hiding. She saw 2 bright eyes and a tiny beak. "Did you do the weeding, Small Brown Bird?" the princess asked with a smile. Small Brown Bird nodded his head. "Then you shall pick the flowers for me." Small Brown Bird flew down to the garden. With his tiny beak he picked a flower and put it into the hands of the lovely princess. He picked another and another until the princess held a beautiful bunch of red and blue and yellow flowers. Then the princess kissed his small brown head and smiled at him kindly. Small Brown Bird was very happy. He sung until the sun went down, and he never forgot the lovely princess. I always used to think she looked so incredible when I was younger. So beautiful, I love her hair. There we go. So that's the end of that one, and next time we will read Big Sister and Little Sister. Thank you for watching, everyone.